Uh, Sir, we'll start it. So, namaste to all of you and a very warm welcome to this evening's Zoom call with Professor Vaidyanathan. As you're all aware, the protocol we follow is only my mic and Professor Vaidyanathan's mic would be unmuted. All other mics will be muted. So we do not have any noise pollution. And so we can hear him crystal clear.
So Giridharji, you would be coordinating, right?
Yes, sir. I would be coordinating.
Okay.
So,
And later the question answer also you will be moderating.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So that was what I was just telling. What we would do is there is an option where people can raise a hand. So we, the moderator and my team, we can see who all have raised a hand. And also some people will send us a message that we want to ask a particular question. So what we will do is sequentially, we will unmute those people who will be allowed to ask a question. After they ask a question, we again mute them back so that, we don't have cross talk and we don't have arguments or we don't have any noise pollution. That is how we manage it. So it will be very structured and very sequentially planned. Friends, let me, of course, Professor Vaidyanathan doesn't need any introduction here. Almost all of us follow him in, social media, and we have seen many of his videos.
I think audio, I think is slightly more is required. I'm not, are you able to hear me correctly?
Yes, sir, we are able to hear you perfect.
Yeah, it's fine. I hope others also can hear me.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, the volume is damn good. Yeah.
Gurunathan is raising his hand. Good. You can hear me.
Yeah. So, of course, Professor doesn't require any introduction. Yet, I think it's courtesy on my part to give a very, very brief introduction about him. He is very popular on many videos that we have seen of him in YouTube, P Gurus, and so many others. Basically, he is a professor of finance he's a retired professor from IIM Bangalore. He has been, 2 times Fulbright scholar and a fellow of ICSSR and a visiting faculty of many universities in US and UK. And he has been on various committees like SEBI, RBI, IRDA, and many others. He has written several books, Role of non-corporate sector in India, and black money, tax havens. And the latest book that he had written, Caste as Social Capital, he had done a program in Hyderabad. Ayushi had called him here. I had the privilege of taking one autographed book from him as well. I'm sure quite a few of you have taken on that day. So he is a very rare feature of somebody who knows Bharatiyata closely, as well as the principles of finance as propounded by the West. Somebody who can amalgamate both these things, and his talk is all full of punches, and if you miss a second, you would have lost something. He is such a knowledgeable library in front of us. We are really privileged to have him amongst us today. Sir, the group that includes here are intellectuals from largely Telangana, and of course from across the country as well. There are people from Bangalore, Mysore, Chennai, Bombay, and somebody from Shillong as well. And there are a few who have logged in from US and UK also. Just to let you know, Prajna Bharati is an intellectual forum which has been there for 28 years, originally founded by Ram Madhav ji. And we run a magazine called Bharatiya Prajna. This is Nirmala Sitharaman ji was the general secretary for this organization when it was founded initially. So this has a very illustrious history of more than 28 years. But unfortunately, we're all locked down now. Otherwise, we would have had the privilege of inviting you in person here. Nevertheless, I think it is our honor to hear you today, sir. As we suggested, you could speak for like 40-45 minutes, and then we'll throw it open for question answer session. Floor is yours, sir.
So thank you very much, and thanks all the people here. I think he was telling many people are from Hyderabad region, right?
Telangana,
Or
yeah, Hyderabad and
Telangana.
Telangana region. Yeah,
Manavadus, right?
yeah, that's
Most
right.
people are Manavadus. I'm happy about it.
Yeah.
And also some people from other places.
Yeah.
I thank you very much. Of course, you might be joining because in the absence of doing anything, any other thing productive on a lockdown situation, you might have thought as well we can go and have a look at this. That's also possible. Anyhow, so this is maybe my sixth or seventh talk on this theme. Of course, to different groups. One group at Calcutta, one at Bombay, another thing. I'm very happy to have one for the Telangana region. We will structure it in the following fashion, the next 40-45 minutes. I will very briefly touch upon the what is happening globally because of this virus, that impact on us, India, and then a way forward, what we can do to after the crisis is over. This will be the sort of a very brief structure of my talk. First and foremost is this Chinese virus or Wuhan virus, which we should call it correctly, but it has been named as Corona and COVID and other thing. For instance, we had an Ebola, a river based, when a serious similar type of a thing took place. It's called Ebola virus. When we had the pig related disease in Japan, it was called Japanese encephalitis. Even in India, some places it had its present. You may remember a couple of years before, it was called. Same thing about Spanish flu. So there is nothing racist or xenophobic in calling a virus which is the origin of the virus is China. So it is Chinese virus or it is Wuhan virus. There is no two opinion on that. And since China has got a good hold on the WHO, as well as on various other bodies, they have bullied and told that no, it is not a Chinese virus. Be that as it may, we will continue to call it Corona. It doesn't matter. But we should be very clear that it is Wuhan virus. Now there are 2-3 questions which are not fully answered. One, of course, is the China knew about it as early as mid-December, but unfortunately they have not informed anybody else, other countries or anything. They sort of kept quiet. A lot of information is coming out now. How China has not been playing, correct in this matter. Actually, they should have informed various other countries as well as travel and everything. They didn't do that. Maybe because they thought they will be able to tackle this. That could be one good explanation which can be given. Or maybe because they thought it's not as serious as it later turned out to be. If you want to give a good explanation for China, of course, if you want to be more nasty about it, you can say deliberately they did not inform other countries and zones in order to make them suffer. Anyhow, and it originated there and it spread very quickly to Italy. That's something which is very, very interesting. Not many people may know or many people may be aware of it. Wuhan and Italy has got a very close relationship. The northern Italy is, I think many of you will know, is the center of world fashion in terms of Milano, in terms of their leather handbags, in terms of their fabrics, in terms of their dress material, and they are considered to be the fashion center of the world. And Wuhan is the one which supplies significant amount of cheap labor to them, as well as substantial amount of material, machinery and other things. So there is a very close relationship with Wuhan and northern Italy. Significant amount of travel and so there have been huge amount of outflow of people to Italy, as well as people from Italy visiting Wuhan for its trade purposes. And that's one of the major reasons why it spread to Italy. But the issue still remains that if you look at the China map, you will find Wuhan is relatively significantly linked with the Shanghai and Beijing. But neither Shanghai nor Beijing had any what one can call good amount of this virus at all spread to those zones. So that's another puzzling issue, because normally it should spread to nearby two major centers or cities, but it has not done. It was only focused in Wuhan and then the world. This is something very, very interesting. So that also a lot of people are asking why it didn't happen in terms of other zones or other places. The third is whether it's spread through a laboratory type of a virus or whether it's spread through the the wet animals market where they were because China is a very interesting way of what one food habits. Anything which flies other than aeroplane, they say they will eat. Anything in the sea other than ships, they will eat. Anything on the land other than trucks and cars, they will eat. That's I am a regular visitor there. I was also teaching at Shanghai University. So they are, they eat anything and everything. So that could have also to some extent influenced in terms of spreading because their eating habits have spread to Italy as well as France. A lot of the Chinese eating joints are plenty in those tourist spots, and many of them are imported actually from China to those countries. So whether that also is one of the reasons for the spread, the speedy spread of the disease is being, some of these will not get answers immediately. And some of these obviously are politically related. In the sense, if something is very sensitive, China is not going to be very comfortable about it. One thing we should know, China has got a huge amount of control of large number of international organizations, whether it is WHO or whether it is WTO, whether it is UN or whether it is, for instance, UN Human Rights Council, human rights. There China is playing a very important role. Can you beat that? It's a dictatorial country, and Xi has declared himself to be a lifelong president. I don't know whose life, whether it is Xi's life or the Communist Party's life, or he has told he is a lifelong president. And they are part of the human rights body of UN. Who are the other members? Don't get heart attack. Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, these are all, and Sudan, these are all the other members of the human rights. They are supposed to tell countries like India or various other countries how we should conduct our human rights. Be that as it may. One thing is China is very, very powerful in large number of global bodies actually. Even the current chief of the WHO, who is an Ethiopian, was appointed because of the insistence by China. China pushed him to that post actually. So they have a very good hold over the large number of organizations. Kindly note, in the case of India, in international organization, we sent this IFS, what you call foreign service officers and various other people go and occupy, and then they do their task. China, it's not like that. Almost all of them are Communist Party members. You should be a CPP member primarily. Then only you can go into all these bodies and other things. So basically, the representatives of China represent the party's interest. So that is the nature of the clout they wield and other. Now in Europe, when it spread, it had a devastating impact actually. It spread from Italy to Spain and then France. Portugal was not so much affected. There is a lot of discussion about it. Why? Because Spain and Portugal are adjacent countries with a huge common border. But they are considered even sometimes jokingly as a brother countries, twin countries. Spain and Portugal, people always say it together. But Portugal was not. One reason some people are ascribing, a lot of studies have to be done. Portugal has a compulsory vaccination for BCG, while Spain doesn't have. So there is one theory which says those countries which had vaccination for BCG are less affected. So this is one type of theory. Europe was already facing severe crisis, even before the coronavirus. I don't want to bore you with too much numbers. For instance, in 1919, G7 had 52% of the global income, 52% of the global GDP, otherwise global income, you can call it, adjusted for what we economists call it as purchasing power parity. And the emerging markets, there are 4 emerging markets: India, China, Brazil, and Indonesia. These 4 had something like 82%. Now, this was in 1990. If you come to 2018, that is 2 years before, G7 share has become 36%. The emerging market share has become 52%. So there is a sort of a shift which has taken place. G7 decline is also what we call monotonically declining. It's not declining sometime and then increasing or something. And IMF has forecast that time, I'm talking about 2018, that G7 will perhaps have something like 25-26% only of the global GDP in 2025. So already G7 was passing through very severe economic issues. And so this has only added to their what one can call problems or added to their situation today. And significant number of countries in Europe are facing severe economic depression. Combined with that, unfortunately, they have another huge problem of illegal migrants wanting to enter into Europe. That is something like 1 million, roughly 10 lakh people waiting outside the border of Greece in order to enter into Europe. And they have all been kept in camps, and many of the European countries are now not wanting any of those refugees anymore. Initially, they encouraged wanting to have some cheap labor and other things. Then they realized many of these people from Yemen, Iraq, and all war-torn countries, including Afghanistan and Pakistan, they are not good enough to do many of the otherwise white-collar or very type of jobs and other things. And the domestic economic compulsions or crisis also, many places resistance started. Now today what has happened, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Austria and Poland are all sealed their border. So in one sense, what we call Project Europe, started in 1980, has come to an end. Europe is not anymore a single entity. I am sure all of you will know, Britain has already exited Europe. So our forecast is maybe in another 1 or 2 years, France and Italy also will exit the EU. So that will be the type of a position. And in that countries, Hungary is something very, very severe. Their leader openly says, we will not accept any Islamic migrants from these outside. He says, we will not accept. So there is a big furor or tussle going on there. And many of these migrants are waiting outside. And many of these countries, and Turkey is the main place where they are staying. And there are also talks that Turkey is actually encouraging them, like to push them into Greece. Some of you may know, if you enter Greece today, almost all places of Europe you can go freely because of the, what one can call Schengen visa type of a situation. And Turkey's, leader has got his own ambition. And sometimes his assistants are talking about re-establishing Ottoman Empire, and some of you may know the Andalusian Empire of Ottoman. So Turkey wants to, have used these people as a pawn in order to create, and already many towns in Europe are having significant amount of Islam population. And whether it is Marseille, whether it is Malmö in Sweden, and various, even London, many people are calling it as Londonistan. London is not anymore called London, actually. Europe is slowly being called Eurobia. So that is the type of issue. Associated with that, China is trying to acquire some good companies in Europe at the low valuation. So, for instance, Australia has enacted a law in which it says a foreign entity, particularly originating from China, cannot acquire any company in our country. Similarly, Spain, Italy, France are working on what one can call a draft of laws to prevent foreigners from acquiring, because most of the companies are at what you may loosely call low hanging fruits. They are already having a low levels of, and even in India, for instance, China is showing interest. Already, it has, some of you might have read in the paper, because it is more than 1%. HDFC, the parent company, it has acquired more than 1% of the shares. It may also be having a lot of interest in other companies, at least what are called unicorn, and it has a huge, more than 60% of Indian unicorns are funded by China. China already has got a huge hold. What we are currently using actually called Zoom. It is supposed to be, the Chinese are snooping on us. I told somebody, lightheartedly. I'm not going to say anything top secret. And some of you may have heard, the ministry, Home Ministry has told you cannot use Zoom for official conferences and other things. TikTok is owned by China. There has got huge investment in Big Basket in our country. So that is the. So some people are telling maybe Chinese are playing the old game. In my village, the puncture wala used to send a boy, say you spread the nail on the road all over the place and come back. And then when he spread the nail all over the road and comes back, a lot of automobiles it passes through, couple of them will get obviously punctured. Then the puncture wala will go and say, sir, I will repair it. I will rectify it another. So many are arguing maybe China is playing this type of a role in terms of creating this chaos and trying to acquire companies. But within China itself, there is a significant amount of economic recession. Some of you might have read about in newspaper that their current GDP has fallen phenomenally. How long they will be able to sustain in terms of acquiring global companies and global positions? So in the light of all this, US is very angry. Very, very angry because US somehow feels China has let them down. A, by not informing them in advance about this thing. And we, of course, they never thought that they will have significant amount of impact. The impact on US, I'm sure you are reading papers or whatever it is very, very severe. Trump is very angry. You might have also read in the paper that he has stopped funding the World Health Organization. I won't be surprised if he, within next, if he gets re-elected, he comes out of UN as well as WTO. So one of the result of all this thing is what you can loosely call death of globalization. All those who are jumping globalization, they are all now shut up. Because most of the European countries are talking about protecting their own interest. What you may loosely call nationalism is now on an ascendancy. The globalization thing is now on a low key. Very many people in Europe are questioning why should Brussels rule us? Why don't our country decide to rule? Not that they were obeying Brussels. For instance, some of you might have read about it, the 3% fiscal deficit. India is very religiously trying to follow, even today. It is not possible anyhow. But none of these European countries followed it. Actually, Spain and Italy fudged their numbers and submitted it to the European Commercial Bank. And some chartered accountant, of course, always they are available. I am sure in the group some are chartered accountant. I am not taking observation again now. But there are enough chartered accountants to sign all those. So they fudged the numbers and submitted. Then EU found out that these countries are funny. They are not having 3% fiscal deficit, much higher than that. So Europe is, having all these, the global institutions are having big challenges. US is not very concerned about the global institutions anymore. US is not interested even in UN. So we should be very, very careful about it. And now I think in the next decade, the bilateralism will be the phenomenally important thing, not this multilateral type of arrangement. And it doesn't really matter to us as long as we identify who are the critical players, and then we can come into bilateral contract or something like that. Be that as it may. Now there are a couple of other things. One group of people are telling because of the virus, there is a domestic, obviously, type of an impact. And what type of an impact is very, very important. One group is telling it is not going to be business as usual. In the sense, once the lock-in period and other thing is over, it's not going to be the same world as it was earlier. I'm not sure about it. Because, one doesn't know. A couple of months later, people can again be as it used to be in the past. I come from a town called Tanjore in my state, Tamil Nadu. There we used to routinely call about this type of Vairagya. Prasanga Vairagya is the one important one. You go and attend some lecture by Chinmayananda or one of those Swamijis. Very, very electrifying lecture. At the end of it, you feel, oh God, very great, and we should follow his footsteps, and what is the point? And after a couple of days, it becomes okay. You are back to your own normal. Second, we call Prasava Vairagya. In those days, pre-contraceptive days, when a lady delivers, she will say, this is enough. After this, I am not going to deliver anymore. enough is enough. And at the end of it, she will end up with 9 or 10 kids in the home. And the third we call Mashan Vairag. You go to a burial ground or crematorium when somebody elderly has passed away. You stay there for a couple of hours and you feel, what is this life? What for it is? What for we are struggling? Why are we earning so much? Why are we fighting with the boss and all that? In Mashan, you have all these thinking. You come out after 4-5 days, things will be. Actually, in our place at the 13th day, we have something called Vaikunth Samaran. We distribute new saris, new dhotis and other things. Ask people go back and do what you used to do in the past. So I call this Purana Vairagya. How long it will last, one doesn't know. People feel that world has changed and it is not going to be the same. One has to wait and see. Yeah, after a couple of months, people may come back to the same old trajectory and same old issues. Assuming some of these changes, and in India, the industry, some of the changes have already come much before Corona. For instance, let's take a couple of industries. Only the print media. The print media industry is in ICU. Slowly it will go into, hopefully, the mortuary. Because I am not very fond of the print media industry. Particularly the English print media, because it depends only on advertisements. 90% of its revenue comes from advertisement, not by newspaper. So, significantly there is a reduction. But if the government advertisement also comes down, then the print media industry will be down all over the world, not only in India. And the internet is providing alternatives to people. Television is streaming 24 hours news. So, there is no additional, except if you are very old, you are used to reading morning newspaper with a cup of coffee. Otherwise, large number of youngsters and other things, particularly the ponderous, op-ed editorials, big articles by profound thinkers and other things. Nobody reads. One who writes would have read it, obviously. The writer of that center page article would have read it. The other one who might have read it is the composer. Nowadays, it is composed in the computer. All others, I think, would not have read it at all. So it goes. Print media is gone. Second is the automobile industry. It was already facing crisis before the Corona itself. One reason is organizations, including government organizations, are not buying any more four-wheelers. For instance, a small institute like mine, we used to have 12 cars. 1, 2, with some 16 drivers. Today, I think we have maybe 1 car. Yeah, whenever you require car, you tell the administrative officer, he contacts one agent car. And this is what is happening in many of the organizations or many of the companies. Coupled with that, this Uber, Ola and other things are come. And so they are creating a huge changes in the automobile industry. Plus, you will also have the electric type of industry in the future. In Europe, many of the inner cities are banned automobile. You can either go by cycle or by walk. You can't go by automobile. So there is a, and this year before Corona, the output in Germany has come down, France has come down, US has come down. So the usage of automobile itself has changed. And now in the light of this, I think it might be more accentuated. Both automobile as well as air travel and all type of travel. Congregating places people will like to avoid for a couple of more months at least, if not years. Because this memory will have people get worried, we will not like to go into all these large, and then, travel at the drop of a hat, jump into the flight and go to Hyderabad to Delhi, Delhi to Bombay, similarly, international travel, Hong Kong to Seoul, and all those travel will be significantly coming down, particularly the corporate type of a travel. So this is the changes. Other is service sector. Most of you may know, they constitute 60-65% of our what we can call GDP. And what is service sector? Service sector is plainly construction, hotels and restaurants, wholesale and retail trade, and transportation, both passengers as well as commodities, and other things like fitter, turner, plumber, carpenter, and some 160 type of trades. These constitute the service sector. So if you look at it, in India, actually trade, wholesale and retail trade is higher than manufacturing. Wholesale and retail trade is roughly 17-18%. manufacturing is slightly lower than that. That's a huge component. The fastest growing was restaurant in India. Last 10 years, every year it has been growing at 10% real growth rate, adjusted for inflation. Practically, like my grandmother time, there used to be 2 hot meal or 3 hot meal per day. Now it is mostly 1 hot meal and other is heated meal. I think everybody here will know what is the difference between a hot meal and a heated meal. My French colleague says in his country, every week only 2 to 3 hot meals. All other meals are heated. So the cooking has significantly come down. These are all pre-corona. Actually, I used to jokingly say, in another 3 years, we won't have advertisement for 3 BHK, only 3 BH and 2 BH. K will get cut off. And like in, we have in Seoul or in Hong Kong, a large number of these huge apartments don't have kitchens at all. They have kitchenette only. In the ground floor, there is a huge amount of food park, 24 hours functioning. People can go and give their coupon and then buy the food. So the industry, and then the Swiggy and Zomato have come, and the entire younger generation was not very enthusiastic about cooking. So this is what I was thinking. So, but this particular crisis, I think the restaurant industry may not be growing at that rate. In other words, people will be more cautious, again, couple of months at least, about eating out, about going to crowded places, or concerned about what type of food is being served, and some amount of what one can call reluctancy will be there. So the restaurant industry will also face a severe amount of crisis or shrinking because of this disease. Wholesale and retail trade will not have significant amount of impact, but one type of an impact may be in terms of logistics. If internet logistic improves, and already I find in some of the towns in Chennai and Bangalore, the farmers are bringing directly the produce to the town and their own vehicles and other things. And then they are distributing among apartments and various other groups. If I do not know how much this trend will continue, if it is so, huge number of intermediaries in the APMC yard and various other intermediaries will get significantly affected. So this is another area which will have enormous amount of impact. Other than that, this fitter, plumber, carpenter, and all these things. In fact, some people say they have all left, and it appears from Delhi and Bombay, many of them have left, and they will come back. Some of you, I do not know whether you remember, 3 years before, there is a huge rumor in Bangalore that all the east and northeast laborers are going to be attacked. God knows how the rumor spread, and there was some talk that somebody misused the WhatsApp, and all of them left actually. Quite a huge number, loads of them left for their hometown. But within 3-4 months, they have all come back. Again, Bangalore is, if I want to get a plumber in Bangalore today, I can't get a Kannadiga. I can't get a person from even Tamil Nadu. He's from Odisha. And I am sure in Hyderabad also, I was told the situation is similar. If you want a good carpenter, you get from Bihar, painter from UP. And all the girls from Northeast have decided to make our South Indian girls beautiful. So they are all running the beauty parlors and saloons, and from Assam and Meghalaya, Manipur and other things. So all these people will definitely be. Initially, there is a lot of worry, will they come back? And then, as usual, talk, why don't we start our own industry in interiors or European? This talk is going on from 1960. I am listening. So nothing is. The metropolitan towns have developed, and a huge amount of opportunities are there in the town. And today, I didn't know, it's not something like the poverty wages or something. A good plumber, a visit today in Bangalore, I do not know about Hyderabad and other cities. A visit he charges anywhere up to 600 to 700 rupees. My plumber told me something like 30,000 per month. It's not a small, sum or anything. So all these skilled people, what semi-skilled or more than that, they will all be there. They will all come back. I have maybe a couple of months here and there could be a difference. So other industries, I don't visualize any huge amount of impact. Coupled with that, Some reports suggest that Chinese-based US, Japanese, and Korean companies wants to move out of China. There is one report which says that the Japanese government has allotted even some $2 billion for relocation. So everybody is jumping, India has got a great opportunity, and we can get all those companies. And I am very, I'm not unenthusiastic. If the companies come here, it's really good, but it's not going to be easy. First and foremost, consistency in policy making. This is something that you may want companies, you may want industries at Delhi level, but finally it has to be decided at the state level. And at many of the states, many of the policy making and things are not very consistent at all. Say for instance, take TS itself or take AP itself. Suddenly you decide, we will have this as a capital of our state. Lot of activity, enthusiasm and other. The new government says, no, this will not be. I'm not criticizing or anything. I'm only telling there is no consistency in these type of decision making. Similarly, TN wants to set up a plant, Sterlite, copper plant. Everybody is very enthusiastic. Suddenly, the new government comes and a lot of rumors are spread that this copper plant is very, very dangerous for health. And so there is a huge problem in terms of having a unified long-term policy, which most of the global companies would like to have. One. Second is, in states like Tamil Nadu and even in Maharashtra, slowly what is happening is, any industry you want to put up, immediately a group of what they call activists come. So they set up the flags and they say no industry. In Tamil Nadu, they will say that Tamil soil will be spoiled completely if you set up any industry. Our language is in danger. Totally unrelated or, but for instance, that Kudangulam plant, you may be remembering, it took 3 years delay actually. It cost huge amount of money because the rumors are spread that Kudangulam is essentially to kill all the people and it is not going to work. Another thing. Lot of these activist group, church group, various other groups jumped into that. And similarly in Maharashtra also this transition is. Some film actor, lady film actor particularly, goes and hugs a tree. She says this tree cannot be cut. The whole industry thing will be stopped because of the activism. So this is the second type of. Third is ease of doing business. One is to discuss in Delhi, in Vigyan Bhavan and all the pamphlets and we should have ease of doing business. But unfortunately, at the lower level, this is not percolated. A city like Bangalore, I am told, a couple of years before, 22 regulations have been followed to set up a pawn shop. Simple, chota shop. I used to give this as a project to my student. Go and set up a small shop. 3 months time. Most of them failed in setting up the shop. I gave them the grade for their approach, methodology, and everything. But they should set it up without cutting corners or without bribery or anything. It's not possible. We have a huge amount of problems of regulation. And each of the regulation is essentially to generate black money. Let's be very clear. Every government regulation, I am telling it, it can be recorded. Maybe China is also recording it. God knows. Every government regulation in India is to help generate paid money for the government employees. It's not to help regulation or anything. Whether it is Food and Adulteration Act, whether it is Shops and Establishment Act, there are 22 such acts which will completely destroy you from starting anything in our country. First, they will come and start in the queue. You have to have a water permission, you have to have electric permission, you have to have a land permission. You want to advertise, you have to have permission from the local municipal council. All these are. So ease of doing business is phenomenally uneasy in our country, except in seminars, in practice. And the US today have got very stringent laws. What are they? In Chhattisgarh or in Madagascar or in Uganda or Philippines, one of the American companies or their contractors or their agent, they bribe. The CEO of the company in US can be taken to task according to their current Justice Party regulation. So it's an extremely severe thing for US companies particularly. And the other companies in Europe and Japan are actually being criticized by US companies. They are at a better position or better advantage. And the Japanese and Koreans are extremely reluctant to give this cut money in order to do the task. So we have to be clear before telling, oh, all of them will come, all investment will come here and other thing. It's a good thing if it comes, but will we get it? What we require is a huge amount of what I call PVN 2.0 revolution. Some of you may remember in 91 there was a massive crisis in terms of foreign exchange, and at that time PV Narasimha Rao, who is actually one of the least recognized and appreciated Prime Minister of our country. If you ask me, the best Prime Minister we ever had was PV Narasimha Rao. I will tell you very clearly. You know what he did? He did overnight, he removed all the licenses. People are shocked actually, because from 1952, our country lived on licensing and quota. And he removed controller of capital issues. He says, why a government babu should decide the share price? Let it be decided by the market. Again from 56. So, whole of Delhi was shocked, and next day morning in some papers, one paper had editorial, temerity of Narasimha Rao, that he did this and what is going, nothing happened. People were happy, licensing is gone, and who are not happy? All the intermediary and middlemen who are roaming around in Delhi making money, they were all unhappy. So, PVN was, unfortunately today we don't have a statue nor a mausoleum for PVN in Delhi. His body was not even allowed inside the party office when he died. So what is required is, this is what I suggested to the Sunny government, PMO, you keep one picture of Narasimha Rao before you. For a crisis, you must be in a position to take extraordinarily severe action. He did that. After that, actually, some of you may remember, Vajpayee did that Pokhran, this blast, nuclear blast, and sanctions were imposed on India. World Bank and IMF and other thing, nothing you will get. US, and he floated the global bonds, actually. He expected some couple of millions to get, he got some 3 billion or 4 billion US dollar from all over the world. We have Indians everywhere settled and they all subscribe to it. So there is no depth of funds available domestic in our country. There is no need for us to worry, will Chinese set up shop here, will Japanese set up. We have enough funds. We have 440 billion US dollar foreign exchange reserve. Nobody talks about it. And this 440, at least 100 will be in all the government securities of the world, earning some 2% or 1.5%. If you ask me, out of these 440 billion, 100 billion can be easily pulled out and used for massive investment requirement internally. Then we have 1.5 trillion. A trillion is 1,000 billion. 1.5 trillion US dollar estimatedly our black money abroad. All the foreign tax revenues. So if you are serious about funds, are not a big issue. So what are the couple of things we should immediately think of doing is this obsession of 3% we should leave, first and foremost. The fiscal deficit cannot exceed 3%. It's not a God-given number or something. 3% is WTO agreed, and as I told you, most of the European countries were not following it. They were fighting it. Why should we be so much obsessed about it? Second is these Basel norms, which were adopted, that banks should follow. If you don't repay 180 days, 181st day, you will be declared you are bad. All these norms should be taken, tied to a red, our famous bureaucratic red tape, keep it inside a almirah for the next at least 1 year. Ask banks to spend, no problem, refinance at the lower level also, and liberate. You see, 40 to 50% of our working capital only comes from commercial banks. Others come from, hold your heart, moneylenders, chits, and other type of small NBFCs. We have a peculiar rule under RBI. Moneylender can lend, he cannot borrow. Have you ever seen anywhere in the world a law saying moneylender cannot borrow but he can lend? How can he do that? But we have a law. The butcher can borrow, barber can borrow. Everybody can borrow but not moneylender. Only in India you have such. And we are obsessed about this so-called black money domestic. Then we have got 1.5 trillion abroad. Why are we upset? Somebody, one of my friend had some 70,000 or something. I was told he went to bank to give it to this. There is some, you may be knowing, some new relief fund for Corona has been formed by the Prime Minister's office. So he wanted to contribute to that, whatever you trust or. Bank told no, beyond 10,000 you have to give in check. Remember, he has got some black money, obviously, 60,000 or not there, not a huge sum or something. But still we have got the same. Why can't you live, say that any type you can, no questions will be asked as long as you contribute to the Corona fund. People want to contribute, they want to get some punya, maybe they are, got so much pop in terms of acquiring this money. Some money they want to let them do it. What I want to say is we require a huge change in terms of our. So what the PVR would have done? First and foremost is we should declare linking of all the rivers as a major project of this country. It will be something like, I'm sure it will be anywhere between 30 lakh to 40 lakh crores. Right? Something like, we have 200 lakh crore as our GDP. So something like 10% of our. All this, daily morning, some of us, may not be all of us, some of us pray, this Gange, Yamuna, Godavari, all that word. All of them are women names, very interesting, ladies. So link all these sisters. And there will be obviously, as usual, opposition, somebody will, put a flag, ignore that. In 1954, Eisenhower announced freeways, that is interstate highways in US. That was a huge project, I-99, I-98, and all that he created in the 50s. So much opposition to it, but he told, forget about it. We require to link US properly from one corner to another. And US is relatively a large size country. Actually. He did that actually. And it was a remarkable success in terms of boosting the economy, providing huge amount of employment in the country. The same way river linking should be taken up on a highest priority. From the northern glacier to the southern tip, we should be able to, and it will generate huge amount of employment. Some corruption, obviously, you cannot have a project in India without corruption. But if you are only focused on corruption, you will not end anywhere. It's always there. For instance, American professor and lady of professor who is in my same department, she came to India. She told me, sir, Professor, India is the only country in the world I find women are worshipping peace. She has traveled to Latin America, she has traveled to China, she has traveled to Russia, Africa, everywhere. Nowhere I have seen a group of women standing in the road near a tree and then showing arti or putting kumkum on the tree or something. I'm sure you would have also seen it in many places. I told her we have developed much more than that. You come with me. I took her to a road in Bangalore, and there were 3 people doing a puja on the road, for the road. People were shocked. Why are you doing? One is a corporate, one is the official of the corporation, other is the contractor. They told, sir, this road is our Kamadeva. In the last 10 years, we would have rectified it in the last 3 years, something like 12 times. We have laid, relaid again and again the same road. And because of this road only, his daughter can do medicine in USA. His son is doing law in Australia. All this is not possible without this road. So this is our road. The road at least should come. This is my point. So create a huge, it will cost something like 40 lakh to 50 lakh crores. This is one thing of what PVN would have done. The second is remove all the regulations pertaining to MSME. There are 26 or 27 regulations for, no need to give any extra fund or anything. Remove all the regulations of MF. You say all these regulations will be kept in abeyance for 1 year. You don't even say they are all removed, because if you say they are removed, the babus will get worried, because that is their main source of income. Salary is only a sort of a side, a pocket money. So the main source of income will go. So you say these are kept in abeyance for only, like your Food and Adulteration Act, Shops and Establishment Act, Contract Carriage Act. I can list 26 of them affecting the MSME. And then you open up the banking sector to refinance as much as possible. Remove a lot of these, the priority sector. Suddenly they introduce second and truck financing is included in priority. Suddenly one time they say second hand truck is not in priority. The whole thing is, whims and fancies of. So this is not, so you just leave it to the bank. Don't worry about Basel norm. Let it, and don't worry about the fiscal deficiency. Use the forex reserve which is available. So announce the linking of rivers from Brahmaputra on the top north to the deep south, Krishna, Godavari. Two things, it will have an electrifying effect in terms of opportunities for employment, small businesses, contractors, all these things. Second, also it will create a sense of nationhood, which is very important. It will break, if you link rivers, it will have a far-reaching implication of breaking the sense of that I am a Maharashtrian, he is of Govanese, I am a Tamilian. No. Once the rivers are linked, the water is common to all. And we are a water-based civilization. Let's be very clear about it. We are not a desert-based civilization. Desert-based civilization created two major religions. We are a water-based civilization. So we should, and all these rivers are, whether one likes it or not, at common level treated as goddesses by the people, ordinary people. I'm not talking about experts and intellectuals and others. Very common people really treat this as. So if you link Godavari and Kaveri, for instance, huge amount of benefit will come to both the states. Actually, it's a huge amount of money has to be. That's all right. We will spend money. This is the opportune time. And why I am telling this time is, this type of crisis times, if you announce something like this, very few people will be there to object. Some people will write in, editorials in their newspaper, and of course, English media, I told you, is dead. So they have to write editorial maybe in Telugu or Tamil papers. That's all right. Let them write. Let them write more editorials. That's all right. That's not important. We should think of something, what one can call, which will alter the structure of our economy, alter the structure of our. Otherwise, every year you find, there is a big tussle between Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Kerala, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. This is a never-ending type of a issue. So we should transcend this, and this is the great opportune time. Every crisis actually India has done well. If you ask me, unfortunately, after a crisis, we have done reasonably well. I told you the 91 crisis by Narasimha time, Vajpayee time, Karan. Then we had this war with Pakistan, 71. All times post-crisis, we have come out of it very successfully. Because basically, we are a very, very understanding and acceptable civilization. Actually, one of my French professor wrote to me, you won't even believe. He said he saw large number of these migrants going from Delhi in buses to various places in Bihar and UP. He says, I am shocked. I asked him why. He says in Paris they would have burnt these buses. They wouldn't have gone into them at all. Your people seem to be extremely cooperative and extremely, what one can call, you may use the word even docile. Whatever it is, they are God-fearing and they are extraordinarily cooperative actually. Otherwise, lakhs and lakhs of people wouldn't have gone back to their respective location. These newspapers are screaming, of course, every day that, and a huge number of people will die and other things are all totally misconceived. Don't believe it. 70 million tons is the grain available with the FCI. What we normally require is 25 to 30 million tons. That's enough. So 70 million tons, the remaining can always be used for the public at large. Even today, believe me, sir, huge number of service organizations are providing food, not just the government. quite a number of voluntary organizations have come up in India on their own, maybe for 1,000 people, maybe for 700 people in various localities at various locations. So we are much more what one can call. I always say, during normal time we are chaotic. During crisis time we become very organized and very what one can call good people. And our society is organized. Government is disorganized. Unfortunately to tell you, in Europe and US, society is disorganized. Government is organized. Two greater opportunities other than this river linking and removing the bottleneck is coming in. One is wellness. Globally, wellness is going to be a huge amount of industry in the next couple of years. Everybody is concerned about their health suddenly. And we have a huge amount of potential in it. You go to London, this so-called their national health scheme, get admitted to hospital. You know, the nurse who comes to serve you is from Kottayam. You go to New York and get admitted somewhere there. The nurse who comes is from, doctor who comes is from India, nurse who comes is from either Chhattisgarh or Kerala or anywhere in India. So we have a huge number of people in this healthcare and wellness industry all over the world. What we should do is invest huge amount of money locally. We have some 400 or so nearly hill stations. Develop wellness centers. Bring all those old people from abroad here. Incidentally, people in Europe and US, old age people are not taken care in their homes. They are all in old age homes. We can replicate them in a much better fashion and served by the same nurses who go there. Instead of them, bring them here. And I think we can become actually the center of the global wellness industry. This is something which we should really think about. And we are appreciated even today regarding relatively, again we are talking, relatively lesser amount of damage due to this coronavirus. So we should leverage on it. A simple thing I will tell you, my grandmother used to give, what is that called, this turmeric mixed in milk in the night. We all used to run away because we feel anything given by grandmother is good for health, bad for tongue. So we will not go near her. So, but today the same turmeric is mixed with milk in US is sold for $4.99. That's called turmeric latte by the this coffee people, and everybody is enthusiastic. Turmeric latte is so popular. $1.99 is small cup, $4.99 is bigger glass. I'm sure this turmeric mixed with milk, they will do intellectual property right and all that thing. And after a couple of months, I will be told I can't mix it unless I pay some premium to the US company. So we have a wellness. I don't mean only the allopathic medicine. We have yoga. We have so many associated type of what one can call activities in wellness, which I think we should. That is one huge potential area for India on a global scale. Second is education. Because of this, lockdown and other thing, net-based education is to some extent becoming popular. In Europe and US, it is already there, called homeschooling. I think we should. We have a reasonably good, IT service providers who are recognized, who are globally accepted. So using them, it will be possible for us to create a massive global net-based education, net-based system actually. We can tell all the American kids that 2 into 2 is not 22, it is only 4. And this is what has to be taught through the internet-based education. Even within India, it will become very popular. Because today our thing is very messed up. Actually, if you have 100-acre land, you become an educationist in India. What is the qualification to be called educationist? I have 100-acre land. Start an engineering college. You declare yourself as chancellor of that engineering college. Give yourself a doctorate also. Bogus doctorate. These are all not earned doctorate or anything. And then you become a educationist. Some of them are also members of parliament from South. Many of these engineering institutions doesn't have any good capability. It has land as the source of activity. So this can be broken if we use our net-based, then no need to bribe to become vice chancellor or all that thing. And one gentleman I should mention, since you are all from Hyderabad, SSV, some of you might have heard his name. He had this certified financial analyst. He started in the 90s. He was an extraordinary Dirgadarshi, if you ask me. If somebody has to be given Padma Vibhushan, I will give it to you. He's a great man. He's a chartered accountant, cost accountant, company secretary, all rank holder. You know what he did? He started his chartered certified financial analyst. He told, my certificate is not recognized by any state government or central government. He put up a board in front of his office in Hyderabad, not recognized by center or state government. What he told is, who required to recognize it? The job givers. And they were recognizing his thing like anybody. Unfortunately, he passed away very young. They recognized it. That is what is ultimately matters. It's not the government babus or our education system is thorough mess, I can tell you. Because you have to claim, there are a lot of people in Bangalore who are running the educational institution who claim that they are minority institution. Because you have some 2 Telugus in the board. Similarly, there are some in Madras conducting education. They have 2 Karadigas on the board or 2 Jains on the board. This whole thing is, I am telling you, is such a messy situation. Our way of conducting and the government regulation is so much. Some of you would have recollect. Ramakrishna Math once told that we are not a Hindu institution because they were so much harassed by the Jyoti Basu government, the local government. Fortunately, Supreme Court threw out the case. They asked, if you are not Hindu, who is Hindu? You say that you follow Vivekananda. Vivekananda is not recognized. But Ramakrishna Mission was not serious. They wanted to come out of the clutches of the government regulation. Same thing in Karnataka. You would have read about it, newspaper, heard about it. Linkayats want to be a separate religion because they run huge number of educational institutions. And they feel if they become separate religion, they can be much better. So this thing is such a mess. I seriously believe net-based education may not be in the next 2 or 3 years, but definitely in the coming decade will alter the face of our education. It will also provide a huge opportunity for us to be, that is the Vishwaguru, real Vishwaguru when we talk about. Globally, we will be able to spread our education net. So health, wellness and education are 2 major opportunities globally for us. That is our strength also. And we have a good amount of labor, skilled people in order to do both of these things. And domestically, we should go for something mind-boggling, what I call PVR ideas. I am a great fan of him, sorry to tell you. His ideas, right? Some people say he doesn't know anything. What? People, I was told he knew 9 languages. He was the first philosopher king of India.
13 languages, sir. 13 languages. 13 languages.
You see, he's increasing it by 4. That's good, actually. He was Janak Maharaj, actually, if you say me. Really, I'm telling, he's a philosopher, king. He had an idea. He could, not many give appreciation for him. He abolished controller of capital issue, which was an institution which was there from 56 and, throttling. He removed licensing. Unfortunately, if he had lasted for more number of years, I am sure he would have looked at other type of regulations also. And he was running a real minority government. Kindly remember that. He didn't have 303 or 275, nothing. He was running it at the mercy of that Jharkhand Subuswaran. So, but he did. So you require big thoughts, big projects now. No more of tinkering. Today also RBI announced, but these are all band-aids. I remember, repo rate is reduced by 0.25%. Or no, that's all right. That's nothing wrong about it. But that's not that. So we must think really big. And if you want to attract global companies, we must think really big in terms of ease of doing business. And 2 projects, river linking, removing of all regulations for MSME. That will cut at the source of massive amount of local level corruption. And that would usher in a new period. From the global point of view, wellness industry should be our country's focus. We should be known globally as like we were known in the 90s and the Y2K and other things. We are known as more of a software country. Same way we should be known for wellness industry and education. These are our areas of where we require not a huge amount of what we can call investment, but we have brains. We have enough number of people. But one thing is, we must give enormous amount of appreciation, pranams to our poorer, lower middle class and other segments of people. They have been extraordinarily cooperative. They have been extraordinarily what one can call struggling in their livelihood, but still they are what one can call trying to support the initiatives. So this is the great period actually. And normally I always say in India, the well-off people always exhibit worse-off behavior. Better-off people exhibit worse-off behavior. The worse-off people exhibit better-off behavior. So these are our greatest assets. These poorer segments and then this lower segment, they have behaved extremely well. So we should give our appreciation and pronouns to them also. Yes, Giridhar.
Thanks a lot, sir, for a very erudite talk. I'm sure you have covered quite a few of them. But before I throw it open to the questions, I would want you to speak about a couple of more issues, sir. One, there is a belief in many circles in Delhi or otherwise that bureaucracy has taken firm grip of Modi II government, and they are running havoc. This is one which I'm hearing quite often. What is your take on that? And second is in terms of when industry is moving out of China, it is not necessarily coming to India. It's going to Vietnam, it is going to Korea, it is going to Philippines or some other places. And there is no better country than India in any term, any which way we look at it in terms of manpower, land, whatever you talk about it. Yet it is not coming to India. What do you think are the reasons, and what should the government of India do to increase that number of people who are going to move away from China?
One is this bureaucracy running is nothing, nothing new about it. And then let us be very, very clear. Our country is run by bureaucrats. Whether you like it or not, you may not like it, I may not like it, but they are the backbone. The joint secretary upward are the ones who decide, and they have taken the oath under the constitution to run the country, and with some checks and balances by the court and other. If the political leadership is really powerful, then they would drive the bureaucracy. If political leadership is not very powerful, then the bureaucracy will drive them. That's all. Very, very, very simple equation in these two. During Kamaraj's time, he was only 5th standard, but nobody could say that bureaucracy was running it. He was running it actually. Even though he was 5th class passed, he knew all the tricks, and he used to tell the bureaucrats actually. There was an anecdote. Somewhere he was going and one bridge was said to be completed. He asked why it is not done or something. And so the people around him, the chief secretary and the chief engineer, they all gave some explanation. He told, what are your education, and he asked, and they all told something, B, I, MA. He told, look, you are all so much educated, you are permanent. I am not permanent. After 5 years, I may go away. Your role is to tell me how it can be done. That it could not be done due to X, Y, Z reason, I can tell. Even though I have passed 5th class, I can tell why a thing cannot be done in so many words. Then this was the first year of his ruling. People were taken aback. So it is a question of, kindly remember, in our constitutional setup, it's a bureaucrat which are expected to run the country under the leadership of politicians. It's not the court which should run the country. Of late, we find in many places, courts are trying to run the country. That's a very sad state of affair actually. It's an executive which should execute and run the country. That's one thing. Second is this Chinese, the international companies in China, I told you, they will come to India if there is ease of doing business at the ground level, which is not there. Right? It's a, the famous story I remember, which actually took place. One boiler inspector went to an IT company and told, I am a boiler inspector who has come. This was in the 90s. This IT company told, there is no boiler with us. We don't have any. He told nothing to it. I am a boiler inspector. I am used to an envelope on a regular basis. Whether you have boiler or not, you have to meet my requirement. See, the regulation, the industry will come to India not due to Delhi government. It is due to the state government. Much of the regulations are pertaining to state government. And unless and until the state governments are able to meet the challenge, companies will not be very enthusiastic in coming to India. You get the point. Huge amount of problems are there at the lower level. Yeah. And all the small level bureaucrat expect some money. So we mistake actually black money is not a reason. Black money is only a symptom. The disease is corruption. Let's be very clear about it. So they will not be very enthusiastic in coming to India. Yeah. Plus, is a non-consistent behavior, as I told you. Today, one chief minister says you set up a shop. Tomorrow, another CM says, sorry, you cannot set up a shop. You're done wrongly, right? So each there is a road. There is a road between Bangalore and Mysore, which is to be constructed. Most of you would know Bangalore and Mysore are adjacent towns, so it's not some 3.5 hour travel. This is used to be called Nice Road. And that owner once came and gave a talk in our institute. Some of them invited. He told 1 road and 4 governments. Practically every new government wanted a huge amount of cut out of that road. He said that whole project itself I have to give it to me. The whole road project I have to, because the new government felt the earlier government has earned a lot out of it. And they used to tell him, no, you have to give to us also. He says, how can I sustain? Let's be very realistic in terms of expecting global companies to come and set up shop here. They can, but it is in the hands of state government, not center.
But
I'm not telling any particular state government, all state government.
Agreed, sir. But what about the role of the courts? For instance, the 2G case, people invested based on a government of India regulation or a particular, policy. And then the court comes and says, you cancel all these things. That has sent ripples across the globe where they don't trust Indian.
Again, that's what part of what I call consistency in your policy. You are not perceived to have a consistent long-term policy.
Yeah.
That is where we have to look at it before we invite some global fellows. I invite guests to my home. Say for instance, one of my, my mother goes and gives coffee, and the other fellow, after some time, my daughter-in-law goes and removes that cup. This coffee you are not actually sorry, it's not meant for you. Then what will the guest do? Exactly, this is the position in which the foreign companies will be in India, right?
Yeah.
You can't,
Very true.
With a point.
Yeah. Sure, sir. Now let's open it up for question. We'll do that, sir. He's already done.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes.
Sir, I'm very happy to hear your lecture. It's an enlightened lecture. You have touched upon 2 things. One is wellness and second is education. And these are the future fields for India to. I just want to know the so-called wellness centers, however, maybe it can be in 2000s. What will be the quantum of turnover in terms of rupees, in terms of employment, in terms of this? Do you think that can meet the major chunk of the requirement? One thing. The second is education. You talk that is sitting in the home and home education. I'm a retired professor, yes, like you. And the present situation of education, not only here, globally also, it has become a business. and the standards are brought down to any, you don't talk, I think we can't talk of standards now in any Indian university. Now it is going to central universities also. So my feeling is, if the higher education is like this, what will happen to the future generation? Will they be able to have some imagination, creativity, originality, intellectual thinking? All these things will be there or not? And what will happen to this country? Otherwise, this, because you have not touched upon this higher education, you just talked of sitting in home and online education. Okay, online education, because it is well.
Okay, can I respond?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think
First and foremost is wellness. This wellness industry is approximately globally 15 trillion US dollar.
Oh,
And of
okay,
that, at least 3 to 4 trillion we should be able to get.
okay,
So there
right.
is and amount of investment is not phenomenal or anything. Basically, wellness industry is much to do with caring for people. Most of the elderly people in Europe and US today are cared by the old age home. That's all. And
Yeah,
once in a year, the children go and give bouquet and call it Mother's Day. Without knowing the meaning, we are also celebrating Mother's Day. The Mother's Day in those countries mean the mothers
okay,
which are kept in the old age home. One day they will be recognized by the children and they will give some bouquet to them. That's all. So wellness industry, we can do much, much better. And we have a huge number of training facilities for nurses, ayas, and so many other type of groups and other. It's not just medicine. It's so I told you 410 or so hill stations are there in India. Each one of them can be developed in India. Very good wellness center. In the 70s, huge amount of hippies used to come to India. Actually, they used to smoke this pot and in the Goa beaches. Some of them might have now grown up and become old. They can come back again. So we can get all these elderly people because there is a social security crisis also in the West. Most of their pension funds are getting dried up, and we can offer it at a much better price. This thing, so we can really create a huge amount of facilities. It's more in terms of an atmosphere. It's more in terms of people affection and other things. Somebody taking care of them, somebody with them, and not more in terms of technology or all those machines and other things will be useful. But much more is in terms of being with them and taking care of them. As far as education is concerned, this net-based education will break what you are telling. The current education is based on landed property fellow, starting some colleges and other things, along with
yeah,
some
you're right.
political and other. But the
Yeah,
net-based education will alter the entire scenario. So the recruiter is interested in good quality products. Recruiter is not interested in where are you from, to whom you are linked, and all those things. So as long as the recruiter recognizes you, and if there is a quality in terms of the delivery. And many people say, if engineering college is done through net, what will happen to the laboratories? A lot of Western countries, they are already doing it. They have a single laboratory which is used by 4 or 5 colleges, outsourced laboratories. Similarly, medical also. Every medical school need not necessarily have a huge hospital attached with that. One single major hospital can be serving with many others. But more important is a lot of these fine arts, statistics, commerce, economics, many of these subjects can be taught through the net actually. And net can give more quality based and better education compared to the current situation where you have to, first of all, you have to congregate a huge number of people. That itself will be a challenge in many places today. At least for a couple of months, people will not be very enthusiastic in congregating in thousands in one single location and other thing, unless they keep distance of 4 feet or something. I think we should seriously, because we have a huge amount of capability and what one can call expertise available with us. And of course, there is going to be another interesting offshoot of this will be the reservation system in education will also be affected by this, because net-based education might be opened up for everybody on a common footing. So it is going to be it's going to be dramatically altering and changing. So as far as future of India, Murthy garu, nothing to
Yes,
worry.
sir.
Every generation always
Okay.
used to talk about future. First, Jayant is smiling already. When you
You're
talk
right.
about future, he is the
Right.
future, right? We are
That
the
is-
we are the past. Our Giridhar is the present, and Jayant is the future. Which are our Surya Jedigunda is also future, I think, right? He is also
Yes.
smiling.
Let
Future
us
is
hope. Let us hope for the best. We'll meet
yeah,
sometime.
they will all take care of it. Youngsters will take care of it. Every generation always say that.
Viewers, is it?
Huh?
Admiral Raman Puri is
Yeah.
yeah.
He's a nice guy.
He referred you to me and I talked to you also
right.
once. Like, let us meet sometime, sir.
Sure.
Namaskar. Namaskar.
Giridhar, anything else? Anybody else?
Yes, sir. Quite a few of them. One request to all of you who has asked a question: you have to keep your video on, because we do not know whether your name by somebody who's hopped in hacker or not. So unless your video is on, I'm not going to call you, please.
I will.
Next
I will
is
consolidate.
Himanshuji.
After 3 questions, I will consolidate and answer quickly. Kindly make it brief.
Sir. Okay.
Because
sir.
7 o'clock I have to go for something else.
Sure.
Vaidyanathan ji, namaskar.
Namaskar.
I've got one question with regard to Indian economy post COVID-19, because all kind of figures are being thrown around. World Bank says it could be anything between 1.5 to 2%. IMF says 1.9%. Goldman Sachs is 1.6%. Moody says 2.5%. ADB says 4%. So, according to your assessment, what could be the likely number? And going forward for 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24, what would be the likely GDP growth? And the second part of the question is, are we likely to hit 5 trillion economy, say, by 2024?
Okay, first one is regarding this 2021. I would not like to forecast, as it always used to be told. The forecasting is a very, very difficult thing, particularly pertaining to the near future, because the situation is evolving on a regular basis, and one has to wait and see. But one thing is, so far all other experts forecast another thing. Interestingly, even though it is a small number, we still seem to be one of the top in the, in the sense 1.5 or 1.2. We are not shown negative so far by anyone. As far as becoming 5 trillion, it's not going to be very easy immediately. One way to become 5 trillion, if you are very serious, I told in a meeting, I was thrown out of the throne, not thrown out, but everybody, I told you, collect an Excel sheet. Hyderabad, Chennai, Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay, all municipal corporation. The name of the corporator, the name of the political, the bureaucrat, the name of the contractor for the last 10 years. It's not very difficult to collect. Am I right, sir?
Yeah.
And freeze all those assets. We reach 5 trillion. Next day, we are a 5 trillion economy. You don't, people don't realize what level of, things are taking place. Anyhow, nominal term or real term, 5 trillion is not going to be easy, given the type of a current crisis. But that need not necessarily be an obsession with us, because the things have dramatically changed. We cannot, still hang on to it. As far as 23, 24, 24, 25, another thing, all over the world, everybody accept that we are going to be a major player in the world today, whether you like it or not, right? And in the context of problems associated with China, we might be doing a much better job. We are one of the, what you may loosely call principal axis in the global drama. So we are going to be quite comfortable, right?
Right, sir. Thank you. Vijay Thotapalli, go ahead, please ask.
Yes. Quick, sir. You have to unmute him.
Yeah, he's been unmuted. 1 second. I think Vijay, you have muted yourself.
Okay. Done.
You don't
sir,
touch it. None of you please touch it. We will unmute. None of you
Okay,
please
done.
don't do anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Very quick question is, why can't we appreciate rupee now? Because the way it has been valued, I think it is irrational. Why should we link our currency to a dollar basket?
Yeah, but is that one of the priorities now? What is
No.
the advantage? You see, we are not Thailand, we are not what one can call Hong Kong, or we are not. You see, our external trade and other things put together is not more than 15%. It's not a big deal for us actually. Whether it is the only area which is having some implication for us is oil. That's a major area. Otherwise, there is not much of a huge. If we are something like 40% export dependent, I will agree with your point of view, or 50% import dependent. I think this concern about, I agree with you, and I am telling you, sir, next 2-3 years you wait. As our economy improves and other economies are facing difficulty and other things, rupee will settle down around 50 for the dollar, right? So that's not what I would rather call, that's not an immediate area in which we should be spending our time. Let it be as it is, because the gold standard has gone and all those things actually. So we cannot now suddenly become, right? We cannot uncouple ourselves completely also from the basket of currencies in which rupee is linked. Okay.
Thank you.
DSR Murthy garu.
Yes. You have to unmute.
Yeah, we are doing.
Okay, Namaste sir. My two options. The horticulture sector is facing serious challenges due to several restrictions, travel restrictions. As it is difficult to store fruits such as banana and others for long periods of time. What are the short-term and long-term steps that we should take?
The first and foremost and only step I will always recommend is the government should get out of this. They should abolish APMC. They should abolish interstate movement. They should encourage. If some farmer in Telangana wants to sell something in Punjab, what is wrong? Let him do that actually, domestically. And some of those which are in real surplus, we can encourage it to be exported also. Almost all the items we have got today surplus. Let's not have any. And our horticulture, our cash crops and other things are doing relatively well. So there is not much of a, according to me, there is not much of a big issue or anything. Right? So agriculture will come out of it with, what you call, with good marks. Right? Good grace and other things.
Okay. Surya GD Guntla, please. Surya, go ahead. Surya, we can't hear you. No, we can't hear you. You have been unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Maybe some problem somewhere.
Yeah. Oh. Fine. I think in the meanwhile, maybe Anil Sadanand, you can go ahead, please. Anil ji.
Hello.
Yeah, Anil.
Yeah.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my face, I don't know what I'm pressing. 1 second, sir. But in the meantime, I'll ask my question, sir. I'll not waste your time.
Sure.
Yes, sir. So my first question is, how to improve our children's psyche towards nationalism? Is our children's psyche is not all right because history is not taught well? That is my first question. Second question is, can the state government, the public sectors, can behave and act well like the Chinese state-owned companies? And my third question is, do we have the actual necessary resource? I'm not talking about human, the other resources like US, Japan, China, or the other Korean countries. And my fourth question, I think this is quite interesting. That is, can we free that IT free for 1 year, or put that income tax free for in abeyance?
Yeah.
Okay. First question about kids being nationalistic. The only way is it has to be sorted out at the household and school level. So far, school level, government has not shown any interest. in changing any textbook or anything. So the currently only one method is at household level, it has to be taken care. As of now, government has not shown any enthusiasm in changing any textbook or anything. Okay. Second is as far as the state government behaving like Japanese or Chinese or Korean and other thing is not going to be very easy. As long as you are in a democratic type of situation, as long as the voting is going to be the deciding factor, it is going to be chaotic only. All countries in the world which are voting based are all having same amount of difficulties or chaos only. Third is in terms of resources, we have enormous amount of resources. Resources are not an issue actually. If you ask me, that's not an issue in India at all. In terms of consistency in policy, in using these resources, that is our biggest type of a problem. As Giridhar told, one government says, steel is okay, 2G is okay, and suddenly, it is altered. Then the court comes in. All this. So this consistency in policy formulation is the most important thing. Last question you asked is regarding what is that called? Sorry, that I forgot.
That is the income tax to be put in abeyance.
Yeah, that's some sort of long run. Only thing I would suggest is focus on big fish. According to me, I have given a paper actually to the central government that up to 10 lakh you exclude people from any consideration of any tax. Similarly, senior citizen up to 20 lakh you exclude. All those who are above 60, why are you harassing them? Filling up forms and all these things. Let them not. And similarly, focus on people who are not on this, 10,000, 20,000 and all this. The paper cost and the communication cost itself is too much. What you should worry is about 500 crore, 600 crore type of that groups only, right? So this is only the issue. The small fry can be ignored or for the time being not bothered about and go after the big fry. Okay.
Sure. Jayant, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes. Namaste, sir. First of all, I'm a big admirer of your knowledge and the simplicity with which you convey such complicated topics. My question is pertaining to the Chinese virus. Here in India, it has converted into Tablighi virus. So the issue here is that the lower class, the daily wage earners are suffering because of this, and the lockdown itself can only delay the inevitable here. So my question is, if the government decides to completely lock down or seal the ghetto colonies, we all know which community is actually spreading this in India. If it does it, will it have an impact on the economy as such, or what is your opinion on this?
No, there is no question of any particular. You see, this community or that community, it is very easier to talk on this what they call Zoom type of a situation. It's not a very small community, it is 25, something like 150 to 200 million. It's not a small number. And another thing is that's not a very homogeneous. We all tend to think it's homogeneous community. No, this Tablighi is one segment actually, and quite a large number of others are not very enthusiastic about this Tablighi fellows. The Tablighi fellows want to live the life of the 7th century, prophet. And they are actually very, very peculiar type of a very dedicated small group. I don't think they would have ever imagined that they will be talked about and they will suddenly come into the limelight because of this virus and other. I don't think it would be very easier for you to talk in terms of, it's not very easy. That's one thing. Second is, as long as you have a voting system, as long as you have, in terms of representatives being chosen and other thing, it's not very easy to talk in terms of a very significant number of people to be excluded or included or anything. And political parties are not going to accept it also. So that's what we have to recognize. And we have to overcome this issue. And now, of course, a large number of people also know about it, and various number of people are, unhappy about it and other things. It's not something hidden or anything. So water will find its own level. That's what I would say, right? Okay.
Sure. Krishnanji?
Hello.
Yeah, Krishnanji, please ask.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Namaste, Professor C. I have two questions. One is, it pertains to the survey that you and Gurumurthy did on the nature of Indian MSME, the small businesses, which are in fact propping up the Indian economy rather than the big guns. So I want to know, is that report public? Or if we can get hold of that report so that we can truly understand the size and nature of the Indian market as compared to the export market, which a lot of the pseudo economists are talking about, that we should be more export oriented. Size of Indian market itself is so huge that if companies concentrate, they can make a lot of money serving the Indian market itself. That is one question. And the other question is regarding black money. I just cannot understand why the government is acting so afraid to capture these big fish like the Chidambarams, the Marans, the Wadhwans, the Sterling Group, Bhushan Steel. Why can't they just put all these buggers in jail?
Anyhow, this is a very first question is actually a book has come out of it, India Unink. There is a book under my name which carries extraordinary details about the MSME and informal sector and their role and other things. This book was published in 2015. It's available on the net also. You can buy the book. I am not telling you should read it. If you buy, that's enough for me. So that book. Second is about black money. This is very easier said than done. We have a court system, we have the judiciary, we have, and then second thing is about external black money. Kindly note, it is not just the politician, it is the artist, it is the sports people, it is business people, it is bureaucrat. Everyone who is somebody has got money abroad. So there is one thing to say, why can't they be all caught and other thing. I don't know, here some, how many people are there? Here, some 40 people?
Yeah, now 40. We are at about
40.
some point 80, 90.
Okay, so that's all right. What I am telling you, among this itself, there will be 5 or 6 people who may be having some funds abroad. So the people who are having funds abroad are not, some only the political leaders whom you mentioned, or all type of people have got funds abroad. So it's a very, very major. It's not a cesarean even, it's a major surgery which has to be, and it takes, and then judiciary is playing its own role. One case where from 23 times the bail has been given to a concerned person. So it's not a very easy thing to, so you have to wade through several layers of problems and consequences in India. And then some people go abroad, like some of the industrialists have gone to London, and extradition is not very easy because their court doesn't recognize tax evasion as a crime at all. So they say tax evasion is a very normal, innovative thing. Why are you so much worried about it? So these are all so very cumbersome. Unless you become a country like that of Xi, that Chinese fellow who has made himself as a lifelong president, and then execute people without. It's not a very easy thing, I would say. Okay.
So last 2 questions, sir. Ram Mohan ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, sir. May I speak, sir?
Ram Mohan ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, we should have one women question. Ram Mohan ji, yeah.
Women are not asking.
Sir, good evening, everybody. I am a retired banker, sir.
Yeah.
I make my final pointed reference to this corona effect.
Yeah.
Should we not think in terms of more localization in relation to globalization?
Yeah.
Taking as a district as a unit or a state as a unit, we develop local innovation for a better either land-based produce or a machine-based manufacturing. And we see that the consumption and demand are more or less localized at the local viable unit. whether a mandal or a district or a state,
Yeah.
and only the surplus will move as a buffer to the next level. And we restrict globalization to only scientific and technological collaborations and in areas to the extent minimum needed. That is my point, sir.
Okay, I am with you. Actually, all over the world, people are talking similar to you in different ways. In Europe, many people are telling, let's look at only the state, that is France. And within France, let's look at only the different type of, what one can call regions or something, areas or something. So what your type of thinking, but it's not very easy to reverse because we have gone in one direction for something like 2-3 decades. If you want to come back to different type of direction, it will take a long period of time. Let's wait and hope how things shape up, right?
Okay. Last one, Amarchand ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Namaste Vaidyanathan ji and everyone. This question is regarding multinational companies operating in India. We allowed multinationals in this country for the past 2 centuries. The first one is the East India Company. And now after that, so many multinational companies are here, from IBM to now Intel. A lot of multinational companies are operating here. But what I heard is China model is different. They are more inclined to joint venture model. So we are simply allowing all foreign companies without a joint venture. Now the Modi government allowed in the military segment. That is very good move. So but we are not seeing these things in the private sector. So post-corona, post-China virus, so do we have any plans? Actually, I really don't know much about joint ventures. I like to know from you. So if it is not already there, hope we should get it after China virus. So any of you, please comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. There are many international companies which have joint venture with Indian private sector also. And many of them also got with Indian government actually. And there are independent global companies which have been operating here for, as you rightly said, not 40, 50 years, hundreds of years. Like your Hindustan Lever or your Cadbury's, and so many companies are. And many of them you may be knowing under the FIRA regulation, they have been asked to register within India. They have also listed in the stock market in India actually today. They really, in that sense, they are not foreign companies, they are Indian operating companies only. And there are many companies from India which are also having global control, like your HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank. They are all considered as a foreign controlled Indian managed company because the ownership is so dispersed. So many of them are holding it and everything. So I think different models are being adopted. It is very difficult for us to adopt something like a Chinese model. It's a state control. The state will decide, whether a particular company can come in or not. Ours is not like that. As long as the company is following the, the laws of the land, the Companies Act and various other regulations, then I think it is quite acceptable or okay. Actually, there is nothing difficult or different about it. Yeah.
Sure. And the last question, Galaxy S10. I don't know, you didn't put your name, sir.
Okay, I am Suresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, Suresh ji, please. This is the last question. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Professor Jit. A couple of days back, in your interaction with Dr. Subramania Swamy, you mentioned about the economy. One of the suggestions was that Indian companies should be allowed to avail the cheap finance from US so that we can have a competitive field in the market. So my question is that if we allow Indian companies to tap the foreign finance market, won't it affect the protected Indian banking system, which will result in a reduced interest on deposit and also on the loan? And as a normal people who are too much in the customer savings, won't it affect our deposit rates?
No, I don't think. We see, if we get global funds, it's not going to come through the public sector banks or something. What is being suggested is the individual, private people can float bonds abroad to attract funds. In India, actually, our rates are going around 6.5%, 7%, 6% and other things. Global rates are around 2.5%, 3% or something. So it is quite possible you can use it. Much better also, as I told you, 440 billion foreign exchange reserve we have got. Out of that, easily 100 billion can be pulled out, and that can also be used. So different type of mixture of funds can be brought in. And that's not going to significantly alter or affect the structure of our banking system. Because by and large, we are a bank-oriented people. Our financial saving, roughly 75-80% goes to banks only, not to share market. Hardly 2-3% goes to share market, actually. We are a bank-oriented country. And similarly, our role of FII and FDI is less than 10%. 90% comes from domestic saving only. And of that, 80% comes from household saving. As somebody was asking me, who is responsible for our economic growth? I told housewives. Ordinary housewife is totally responsible for our growth. So I don't think it will have significant impact on our bank. It's not going to replace our banking system. It's not easy, you know. Even if you bring in $2 billion, $3 billion, that cannot be, you know, that's really what you call a, you know, small amount for an elephant size of India in terms of our requirement, right? So they don't have any major impact on our banking system or anything.
Sure, sir. I think we'll close it at that, but let me ask a final question from myself. I think one area you didn't touch upon is how is it going to impact on the religious practices of Hindus? You know, you can't congregate so much in temples, for instance. Temples are now not going to be hotspots. If you don't want it to be hotspots, you're not going to go there. So would that end up in people being irreligious or walking away from religion, or would the religion take another turn? How do you view it?
See, fundamentally, first of all, Hinduism is not a congregating religion. Let us be very clear about it. Christianity and Islam are the congregating religion. Every Sunday they have to go, every Friday they have to go on other thing. In our case, we are not, we congregate for specific what are called purposes. If there is a car festival, if there is a Kumbh Mela, we congregate and then we disperse. Immediately we disperse. We are not a congregating religion. In the sense, even if you congregate, it is for individuals to pray to God. There is no, you know, sermon given by any. Actually, our pujaris are totally different than the pastors in the church and Maulvis in the mosque. Our pujaris never give any sermon. Yeah. They only chant mantras to propitiate the gods, or that's all. Actually, you know, I should share it with you. In the 80s, we had a huge amount of debate with the American immigration people who felt our priest and these pastors and Maulvis are all one and the same. We have to tell them our priests are totally different. They are not going to be involved in propagating anything. If at all, they will chant some mantras to God and collect money from me. That's all. Nothing more or nothing less. So we are not a congregating religion. So first point we should remember. We are one-to-one. That is one person relationship with God.
But what happens when Tirumala and others start losing revenues? No. Temples start losing revenues.
They won't be. They can continue to have this distance thing. Instead of Tirumala crowd being touching each other, 4 feet gap they can have. And then they can go and pray to God. And then now, you know, it won't make people irreligious or anything. Let's be very clear about it. That is not, because, you know, there are a lot of people who don't follow all these rituals. But still people are very, very, you know, what one can call, I would say, religious. So it's not something which is going to, it will affect other congregating religion. Like for instance, the Islam, they have told the Mecca mosque itself will not have a huge congregation. Because why they are congregating religion is, they believe that their salvation lies in being together. Actually, if you look at it very deeply, our salvation lies in being alone.
Correct.
Not together. I don't want to get joint salvation. Every individual has to pursue his own goals and vanaprastha, and you go alone, and so that is a, you know, it's a totally, and then we are not very particular about converting people also. Yeah. Congregating religions are interested in converting people to get more numbers, which we are not very particular. That means every Hindu doesn't feel that 2 more fellows have to be added to the what one can call the basket. Not required. I don't think it will have a tremendous type of an impact.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. I know you have to rush to another call.
Yeah.
And it's been a pleasure having you on the call, sir. And I'm sure.
Thanks all the participants for spending
we still have a lot of people asking, but I had to cut short somewhere.
Yeah,
And we had to close it.
A lot
out.
of people. I thank you all phenomenally for spreading this evening, and go back and start washing vessels. Help your spouses. Help your right, or vessels, or do the clothes or whatever it is, or cooking help, or right, or
Thank you so much.
or at least eating help, right? If not cooking help. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Namaste. Bharat Mata ki jai.